Hey guys, I'm Philip Wilder, and did you know that this is actually not a circle? Or actually, it's really a rectangle. Now you might be wondering, how in the world can that be a rectangle? Well, you're thinking right now that it's a circle because you are confined to your perspective. Now let's alter your perspective a little bit, and I'll show you what I mean. Yes, it is a circle for you right now, but it's also a rectangle. Now, how can you be wrong in that situation? You must have thought for sure it was a circle, and there's no way it couldn't have been a circle. Well, that's because you were stuck in your own perspective. And oftentimes when we're stuck in our own perspective, we can be very, very wrong, but yet have no idea. And in many ways, this is the case with doing the right thing. This is why we need to trust an outside perspective, or God, ultimately. Let's get to it. So today I want to look at Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 through 7. And it says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord, and turn away from evil." Verse 7 I think is really important. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord, and turn away from evil. Ultimately, what it's saying is when we are wise in our own eyes, we oftentimes tend towards evil. Now, we might not think that it's evil at the current time, but that's because we're confined to our own perspective, and we need to step out of our perspective to see if something really, really is evil or not. I'm sure you've watched the movies or you've heard of interesting and terrible, terrible people who have done terrible things with the weird thought that what they were doing was actually good. Most people wouldn't consider themselves evil, even though they're doing terrible things. They just don't understand that what they're doing is terrible. Instead, they think it's good. And so it's very important that we don't just decide what is good based off of our own understanding. Instead, we should trust in the Lord with all our heart, and do that instead of leaning on our own understanding. Now, I want to share with you a embarrassing story that I lived through. About 3-4 years ago, I was serving on a college ministry team, and I got paired up with this girl, Rachel, to lead a snowboard outreach time. Well, I thought, okay, sure, it's Rachel. Rachel was the only other single girl on the team. At this point, I was single. And I thought, okay, the ministry's trying to set us up, whatever. I wasn't all that thrilled about it. I didn't know this Rachel too well. Anyways, I was talking to her some, trying to figure some things out. First, I was like, I didn't even know she snowboarded, but I guess she does. And so I called her and I was like, hey, how's it going? And she's like, oh, it's going good. I'm just driving down to Albuquerque with Dakota. And I was like, Dakota, that's interesting. There's a guy on our staff team named Dakota, and he was married. So I was like, why is this Rachel riding down with Dakota? That's a little bit weird. And then I started talking, and eventually things started clicking a little bit, and I realized, wait a second, there's 2 Rachels on our ministry team, and they didn't include a last name. This Rachel must be Rachel, the wife of Dakota, not Rachel, the single Rachel. And it just blew my mind. I was like, wait a second, that's crazy, because when I saw Rachel without a last name, I just assumed it was this other Rachel. And then everything, I started filtering through that understanding. When I called her and I heard her voice, I didn't know her too well, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess this must be Rachel's voice. And when I found out that she snowboarded, I was like, didn't know that, but I guess I was wrong. She snowboards. And then when she was driving down with Dakota, I was like, maybe they're just all 3 driving down together. And then after that, it finally clicked. My understanding was wrong. And very embarrassingly wrong. And this can happen to us all the time. We think that we know it's right, and because we think it's right, we start filtering everything around that perspective to back that up rather than to actually follow the truth. So let's make sure that we're not doing this in some other areas. And I'm going to share with us 3 areas that we really need to be cautious that we're not doing this in. The first area is we need to make sure that we are trusting God with our hearts. We oftentimes think that we know what we want, but how many times have you gone to an event thinking that would be so awesome only to walk away being like, oh my gosh, that was really boring? Or how many times have you gone to a restaurant and picked a meal that you thought was going to be phenomenal only to later find out that it was really gross? Or what about picking a job or a college degree path? So many times we think we know what we want, but we're actually wrong. So why would we trust ourselves in what we think we know what we want when we've been wrong many times before? And why not instead trust God, who truly does know our hearts and knows exactly what we would really love to do? Let's trust him instead. Surely he cares about us and would lead us in these good things, exactly as Psalms chapter 23 talks about. The second thing that I think we really need to trust God with is with our morals. Our society loves to come up with morals and say this is what is good, this is what's bad. Or we come up with morals and say this is what's good and this is what's bad. But how many times have people's morals been wrong? Look at Hitler, for example. Classic example, I know. Or look at other terrible people who have done quote-unquote great things by actually doing terrible things. If their moral and their internal moral compass was wrong, then how could we trust that ours is right? Well, we might say, I'm just going to trust what others say and trust what society says. But society has been very wrong too. If you look at ancient cultures or even modern day cultures, how they kill their babies, or you could look at the Holocaust, or you could look at slave trading. They thought they were doing something that was totally fine, but it wasn't. And we know now that it wasn't. This might poke your bubble a little bit, but what about abortion? We might think that it's totally right. Some of us might think that it's totally right. But I bet you in about 50 years, we'll look back on this and we'll realize, oh my gosh, that was a very terrible thing. How could anyone have actually considered that to be okay? So if we can't trust our morals or can't trust society's morals, then whose morals do we trust? Well, God's. His morals haven't changed at all. This is why we should trust in the Lord with all our heart and do not lean on our own understanding. That's Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 right there again. So let's not trust our own hearts. Let's not trust our own understanding of morals, but also let's not trust our own understanding of the future. We have never seen the future. Why do we trust what we believe the future holds rather than what God is leading us to? How many decisions have you made that have turned out to be terrible decisions because you didn't know what the future held? I'm sure if you're investing stocks this last year, if you had known it was all coming, you would have invested very differently. I wish I had invested very differently. Well, in the same way, we make so many decisions every day based off of what we think the future will hold when we really have no idea. But God is the only one who truly can see the future, so why not trust his understanding of what the future holds? He's the one who has seen the future. He's predicted the future many, many times in amazing ways. And thousands of years into the future, he's predicted it. Well, thousands of years in the past, he's predicted the future. So let's trust God with the future. And if he says to put our money here, let's trust him. If he asks us to give up some of our money, let's trust him with that as well too. So let's trust God with our heart, with our morals, our understanding of morals, and our future. Surely God knows the future and all these other things much better than we do. We might think we know something, only to find out several years later that we were very, very wrong. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.